Hello.
Okay, well, welcome everyone to the fourth in our series of the Green and Healthy School webinars. For those of you joining us for the first time, welcome for the first time, and for those of you returning, welcome back. My name is Mila Kelly, and I will be your facilitator and one of our speakers for today's call, and also for an upcoming workshop that I will talk about in just a couple of minutes. I'm the coordinator of a program called Peaks to Prairies, which is a pollution prevention center for EPA's Region 8, which is basically the Dakotas and the Rocky Mountain states. We are one of 8 EPA-funded regional centers whose mission is to distribute tools and information to businesses, industries, state and tribal government agencies, all kinds of audiences, basically for the purpose of aiding in the practice of pollution prevention. And we are a program under Montana State University's Department of Extension, Housing and Environmental Health in Bozeman, Montana. And when we're talking about pollution prevention, and I'm sure I'll mention it a few times during this talk, really we're just talking about working on environmental problems by eliminating them, reducing waste and pollutants at the source, at the outset, rather than through treatment or disposal. So, for example, moving from traditional cleaners to a green cleaner is an example of pollution prevention because you're substituting a hazardous product with one that's less harmful to the environment and human health. So many of the things we're going to be talking about today with regards to energy conservation and waste reduction is really just trying to eliminate the waste, whether it's carbon dioxide or it's waste pollution at the beginning rather than at the end of the pipe. So basically what I do is connect people who have questions with people who have answers on a variety of topics that relate to pollution prevention. And one of those topics that we're dealing with right now is healthy schools, and that's why we're all here today. We all care deeply about our children's health, and today we're also talking about a school's bottom line too, saving money while we reduce our environmental footprint. And we put this series together with that in mind. So we started out with talking about indoor air issues in schools, talking about integrated pest management, green cleaning, talking about toxic chemicals in your school. That includes school chemical cleanouts, PCBs, lead, asbestos. And today we are talking about reducing our carbon footprint and our waste reduction footprint. We're talking about energy conservation and waste reduction. And we have one more final talk in our series, which is Environmental Justice Grant Application and Management. So once you've taken and digested all of this information that we've provided, and you might be looking for some funding to implement some of these programs, this would be a really, really important session for you to attend. And we are also taking all this information and wrapping it up into a one-day workshop. And this is going to be in Billings, Montana at the Bighorn Resort on June 16th. So if you know of anyone who might be interested in this series, or if you want to get more in-depth with some of these topics, we're going to have some presenters, obviously some presenters there, and giving you all this information plus a little bit more in just one day. So the workshop's free. Travel scholarships are available, but you'll need to get those submissions in soon. So if you know of anyone who might be interested, just go ahead and contact me, or we also have our registration form at www.tribalp2.org, which you can see on the left side of the screen there. So before we go ahead and get started, just a couple of housekeeping notes for those of you who are on a webinar for the first time. Everybody is muted so that we don't hear a lot of background noise. But we would like to encourage you to interact and to ask us questions. And the way that you can do that is by typing questions into the question pane, which should be on the dashboard on the top. I don't know if it's on your left or your right-hand side of your screen, but there you can type questions into there, and then we will facilitate those and answer those as we go along or at the end of the presentation, depending on what the question is. And I forgot to mention before, but all of the past presentations, if you missed any or if you're interested, are posted at www.tribalp2.org. So go ahead and check that out. Today's presentation is reducing your footprint, waste reduction, and recycling in schools. And I think this is a really important topic to all of us. No matter how we live, work, and play, we all produce waste. And we can control and minimize this waste by reducing reusing and recycling it, and that's what we're going to talk about. Most waste reduction, in whatever form that takes, saves us money, it saves us energy, it saves natural resources, and it teaches young children and young adults how to live a little bit more lightly on the earth. We are going to talk about we're going to first go through some areas that we commonly see opportunities for reducing waste in schools. So energy efficiencies, paper, the lunchroom, air pollutants, and then we're going to talk about recycling and some of those basics, paper, plastic, cardboard, e-waste, and then some of the things that are a little bit more difficult to handle, e-waste and mercury. And then we're going to talk about special activities. So these are really just opportunities to bring about awareness to the school community that can be a little more fun, a little more insightful, and also revenue building. And then we're going to wrap this up with a discussion of some strategies for success. So once you've decided what you want to tackle within your school, how can you go ahead and get started on some of these. So we're going to, but before we do that, we're going to, this is our interactive portion of our presentation, so hopefully it will work. We want to ask you some questions and get your, just get a handle on where you are right now and what your current level of knowledge is. So with that, we're going to go ahead and launch a couple of poll questions, and you can answer those immediately as they come up on the screen, and then we will hopefully I will address those within our talk, and then we will we'll ask you the same questions again and see if you actually learned something from our talk today. So we're going to go ahead with our first poll question, which is the annual energy bill to run America's schools is more than what is spent on textbooks and computers. True or false? This is where I would love to have a little Jeopardy music next time around, next series. That'll be my goal. Okay, almost all of you have voted, and the poll is closed. And we'll talk about this, the answers to these questions as we go along. So our next poll question is, what percent of the total CO2 emissions in the U.S. are commercial, including schools, and industrial buildings responsible for? 10, 25, 50, or 75%? Great. All of you voted. I'm glad you're all figuring out this technology. And the poll is closed. And our next poll question, moving away from energy a little bit, the largest generation of waste from a school comes from the cafeteria, classrooms, or main office? Great. Thank you. And our final poll question is, the best way to dispose of electronic waste is in the landfill. True or false? Okay, great. Looks like you're all pretty well educated, which is a great place to start. So, so from there, we're going to move on to a couple of things before I introduce our next speaker. And the first is why we are targeting schools and why we're reaching out to schools with regards to waste reduction and to energy efficiency. So why schools are so important. And you guys, I'm sure, know this better than I do, being in the education field. But there's lots of reasons to talk about waste reduction and energy conservation in schools. The first is that schools can often be the largest waste generator in town. And this is particularly true for communities such as ours that are rural communities and where there's not a lot of manufacturing in town, where a lot happens within the school system. And so, so that's one reason. And the second is that students are highly motivated, and they really like hands-on, important work. And probably the third and most important is that by teaching these types of things and by modeling these types of behaviors, we're building a future of well-educated consumers and recyclers simply by modeling behavior to an age where they're most likely to adopt new behaviors for life. So we have in our midst, within our schools, a captive audience of impressionable youth, and so we want to try and model the best behavior that we can to for the benefit of energy conservation, for the benefit of for all that we do. So and some of the other reasons of why school buildings are so important. Commercial buildings and industrial facilities, which schools are a huge component of, generate about 50% of U.S. carbon dioxide emissions. Energy costs represent a typical school district's second largest operating expense after salaries. It's more than the cost of computers and textbooks combined. Energy efficiency is vital to the United States, to schools in the United States. The nation's over close to 18,000 K-12 school districts spend more than $6 billion annually on energy. So the impact of everything from air quality to fossil fuel production to your school's bottom line is pretty obvious. It's really monumental. In addition, 30% of the energy used in these facilities purportedly just goes to waste. So we've learned that a reduction in energy use of up to 10% is possible with little or no cost to building owners and managers. So this is the kind of low-hanging fruit, or fruit that's not even low-hanging. It's just laying on the ground that we're chomping on. It's really easy stuff to deal with. So no matter where your school falls on in the continuum of energy efficiency or waste reduction, there's opportunities there. And with that, we're going to start our reduction portion of our talk with some information from Tim Tolman. Tim is works for McKinstry, which is an energy, well, I'll let him introduce that, but he's going to talk to us about how schools can improve their energy efficiency.
I'm Mila. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly, Tim.
Well, good. Well, Mila, thank you very much for the introduction, and I appreciate everybody logging on. And I'm going to, my name is Tim Tolman. I'm going to keep this relatively generic and hopefully kind of grind down to some details near the end. Real quickly, my background is about 25 years in energy conservation. I live in Montana. I've done a lot of energy conservation in schools. And McKinstry, just so you have an idea, is what is called an ESCO, an energy services company, where we go into school districts and assist school districts in lowering their utility bill and conserving energy and making sure that the energy savings are paid for, that the construction project, that is paid for by the energy savings. And so I'm going to start at 10,000 feet and kind of go down from there. Mila brought up a couple really, really good points that I'm going to talk about first of all. The first thing that you need to do when you look at energy conservation in a school, before you start looking at investing money in new heating systems and doing things, is you need to get the school that you have, you need to wring out the low-hanging fruit, the fruit on the ground, and you need to do that first. So you need to look at behavioral savings. You need to look at how the building is operated. And so my first suggestion, we're working right now on 8 schools in the state of Montana. The first thing that we do is go in and talk, of course, to the administration, but equally, if not more important, is to talk to the staff that runs the school. They're the ones that know how the school's running. They're the ones that really know where things can be saved. A lot of times, and I know it's true of every school district I'm talking to right now, a lot of times we're heating the building and we're keeping the windows open. We're cooling the building and we're keeping the windows open. You can't expect to conserve energy until you get a relatively good grasp on what to do to run the school correctly. The second thing that I think that you should do before, once again, you invest any money is to what is called retro-commission the school. What happens over time after you have a new building built or an old building is they get out of sync. Things aren't run the way they should be. The control systems are no longer running the way they should be, or for the sake of it, the control systems are bypassed or they're broken. If some of you still have pneumatic thermostats, they're leaking air. Before you go back into doing something for a large investment, find a firm, deal with a good engineering firm, a good energy construction firm, and go back in and have them walk through, not an energy audit yet. We don't want to do that yet. You want to do a commissioning audit. You want to have somebody come in and you want to give them all the plans you have of how the building should be operating, and meet with your head of facilities, and you want to say, how are we running the school now compared to how should we run it? Because the way you should be running it is the most efficient way that school can run. So first of all, unless you've changed a lot of use for different areas of the schools or different classrooms, go in and see how the school is operating now and bring it back to specifications. This should not be expensive. And it should be something where somebody, a commissioning agent, can walk through the school. He can look and say, this thermostat is broken, and fix that thermostat when he's there. You don't need to get into a large contract with somebody to go and have this done. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having somebody assist you in getting it back and tuned up. That is the first thing I would do before I went to an energy audit. Once you get there, once you have it commissioned, then you know truly the energy use of your school. At this point in time, then yes, I think it's for an energy audit, and let me describe to you how I think that should be done. Find and I'm not going to talk with regard to your laws or how you go about procuring engineers or contractors in each individual state, because I'm not familiar with that. So I'll use Montana for an example. What Montana does, what a school district will do in Montana, is they will find 3 or 4 qualified contractors. And they'll go out to those contractors or engineers, and they'll have them come in and say, what are you going to charge us for an energy audit? Well, the first thing you want to do is to have that engineer, for the sake of it, take your drawings, take your energy bills, 3 years of energy bills, have him or her look at those energy bills, have him look at the drawings, and let him know and compare you against the baseline to determine if you even have potential for savings. When I say compare it to the baseline, I'll tell you that in Montana, the average dollar per square foot for heating, cooling a school building, and as you might imagine, we don't cool a lot of school buildings in Montana, but the average cost, now, is $1.25 to $1.30. Now we've done plenty of these lately and are in the midst of doing more. We've only had one school district that has been way above average. Most of the districts that we deal with right now are average or a little more. But we've taken these districts from $1.25 a square foot to 80 cents a square foot, saving them 25 to 33 cents a square foot on their utility bills. Those are drastic savings for these districts, and they are enough savings to pay for what the improvements they need. So before you have the audit done, have them come in and compare you against a baseline. Choose a contractor, consultant, engineer, and then have that done. I would be very, very diligent in my investigation of who you choose and who you have do this. What you don't want here, and what has been done in the past for years, is somebody will come in and do an audit for you, give you a report, and walk out the door. What you have then is an audit that sits on your shelf and nobody to do it. What I would do instead is I would find somebody that has a post-audit construction plan on how to do this for you, taking it soup to nuts. You want to find somebody who can, once he tells you that you need lights, lights will pay for themselves, as we all know, digital controls, you've got some variable frequency drives to work with, or maybe you need a new boiler. You don't need that report to tell you that. What you need is the report to tell you that, what the construction costs are, what the savings are going to be, and an implementation plan. No matter what state you're in, there are plenty and plenty of firms that can do this from soup to nuts for you. That's what you need. Another audit on your bookshelf is going to do you absolutely no good. The second part of the audit, when you're dealing with somebody, you need to determine what your financial expectations are. Do you want to look at things that are 5 years and less, 10 years and less, or more, 15 years and less? And then you need to, as you're walking, having that firm come through, you need to also talk to them about, other than energy, what problems are you having in your district? This motor continues to burn out. Every 3 years, we burn out this motor. The motor, number one, might be energy inefficient, but number two, that motor is costing you $5,000 or whatever it is every 2 or 3 years. And make sure that the firm that comes in also deals with deferred maintenance issues that are energy users. It's a big deal because it's another way that you can help pay for a project. So please make sure you look at that. The next thing I want to bring up is make sure that you're not only looking at fuel, such as natural gas or propane or biomass or whatever you're looking at, whatever you're using. And obviously they're looking at electricity also, but one of the biggest and fastest paybacks in schools that we're finding in Montana, and we have relatively low prices for this, is water. Water conservation is a really big deal now and a very fast paybacking item depending on how you pay for your water. Low flow toilets, low flow faucets, anything porcelain, I'll put it that way. They have very, very good paybacks, and you're going to, when you look at your budget, you're going to look and say, boy, we spend a lot on those, or have, or going to in the future. Those are items that can be in the 5 to 7 year payback, and they're great items for not only paying for themselves, but to help you pay for other things. So my next item with regard to your energy audit. Somebody comes in, the engineer comes in, or the contractor. He gives you, what you want him to do is you want him to give you a menu of services, a menu of energy conservation measures. The lighting, the faucets, the boiler needs repair, the controls, and you want him to do that for you by individual school. And you want him to be able to then put that up on a screen in front of you with his computer and let you build your own project. This is your project, number one. This is not an energy company's project. So you want to make sure that when he adds one ECM, he checks one, and he takes another one off, that it automatically updates and shows you what your project looks like. Everybody has the ability to do this. If you have a contractor who says he can't do that, find one who can, because this is pretty easy stuff to do anymore. The other thing is find a contractor who will give you a G-max cost, the gross maximum cost of your project. Maybe he'll tell you that all your schools are going to cost you $1 million to retrofit. So ask him, well, if they end up costing me $1 million, 100,000, how do we rectify that? He should be responsible for that other $100,000. Every contractor is doing this now. Make sure you find a contractor who is willing to do that. So back again to the selection of a contractor. Make sure that you have all your questions in line and find the contractor. And I would say probably you could deal with the Department of Energy, your state energy bureau, the EPA, whomever. They'll have a list of contractors. You want to make sure that you do that. Now, one of the things I wanted to do here is I wanted real quick to talk a little bit about some low-hanging fruit. Other than retro-commissioning, which is the first thing you should do, we know that. Other than retro-commissioning, and I'm sure all of you have done your lights, but if you haven't done all of your lights, if you still have the old T12 fluorescents, which are the big ones, the big tubes, you need to do that for two reasons. Number one, they are large energy users, and number two, I'm sure that you can get rebates from your utilities for replacing those, but not for very much longer. You're not going to be able to. They're going to discontinue the manufacturing of T12 lights, and after that, you're not going to get your rebates on those. So lighting would be one. The next place I would go is controls. After that, I would, depending on what you have, but the simple maintenance item like steam traps. Here's another one that really pays for itself quickly. If you have a large garbage fee that you're recycling, but you still have a lot of garbage, and the guy's coming once a week or twice a week to empty your garbage, trash compactors pay for themselves very, 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 very quickly. It's a good thing to do. You can have those guys come once a quarter instead of once a month. It'll pay for itself quickly. Now, I'm going to give you a couple examples if I might, and then I'll wind down here. A couple examples of some things that we have done so you know this is possible. There's a school in the state, in the northwestern part of the state, right up by Glacier, by the name of Browning School District. The Browning School District's about 400,000 square feet, so it's not a small school. But we're looking at energy conservation measures in the Browning School District right now, and nothing fancy here, just the low-hanging fruit and the stuff that we can do behaviorally, and then some controls. We're looking at a project in Browning that will pay for itself easily in 10 years. It will, they can finance the project from the energy they save. There are lots of banks that will do that, and it's just a very, very, very good project. We have a small project in the state for those of you who have smaller schools, 30,000 square feet. The simple payback without financing for the project was 5.6 years. That included new burners on their boilers. So there's a lot you can do if you do it right. The last one I'm going to give you is we have a large project in the state of Montana, 2,100,000 square feet, 22 buildings, and just, as you might imagine, a lot of things that needed to be done. When we did the audit on that, we found 471 energy conservation measures to do. Working with the district, we took it from 471 down real close to 200. It was like 192. It was an $8 million project, a little over $8 million. The energy savings in that project pays for itself, and so listen here real close. It pays for itself out of energy, and we increased the amount side of fresh air into the district because they weren't meeting code. It still paid for itself in 15 years. So those are some examples of what you can do and what you should be able to do if you look at energy and find the right contractor, right consultant, and go about it correctly. So first of all, look at what you're doing behaviorally. Second, look at retro-commissioning. Third, look at your energy audit, making sure that you find the right contractor to take it not only into an energy audit, but into a project that actually gets done. And if you do all of those things, I think you'll find that you can, if you do all of them, you can have a project that can pay for itself pretty easily within a 10-year time period. Mila, that's it.
Great, Tim. Thank you so much. Do
You
we
bet.
have any energy-related questions that we want to address right now?
Let's see. We have a question, how can Energy Star assist schools?
Well, I'll take the first shot at that, and you guys can take another one. The only Energy Star projects that we're presently involved with is the last school district that I talked about, which was the large one. And one of their goals was to get all of their buildings to Energy Star. So as a part of the project that we're doing, the $8 million project that we're doing now, we're completing all the paperwork and doing everything to make them Energy Star buildings. One of the ways that we see this being a real benefit is, and what we have to do, Mila mentioned it earlier, was to get the students very, very, very involved. So we're setting up an internal website where the students are helping construct that website, and we're making this a very public approach to saving energy to help the kids. But we have not done very much with Energy Star directly, as that's what the school district's doing.
We have another question. Are LED lights viable and cost effective?
That's got to be the best question. I knew that one was coming. I'm going to give you two answers on that. The first answer is make doggone sure that you're dealing with a reputable LED manufacturer. Right now, because they're the new sexy thing that's out there, there are a lot of manufacturers, a lot of people coming up with LED lights. We have a project going at Montana State University right now and looked at LED lights and had a company come in and ask us to look at it, and they were not, absolutely not, a viable alternative. But we have another project, the City of Billings, where they are a viable project in the parking garage. So I'm going to tell you it's going to depend on the application. It's going to depend on a lot of things. Remember, they don't emit a lot of heat. So if you're in a northern climate and you have a tremendous windstorm on the outside and snowstorm, the LEDs don't emit a lot of heat to necessarily melt the snow. So there's a lot more factors than energy savings, but I can tell you that we believe they will be a viable option here quickly. Just be careful.
Great.
Okay. I have two more.
Okay.
What return on investment would you recommend for energy conservation repairs and upgrades?
I would say that, once again, you kind of asked two questions there. One is energy conservation measures, and the other one's upgrades. So let's separate those by saying, if you want to do the entire district, and you're going to look at such things as the boilers, and you're going to look at all the HVAC equipment, and the whole 10 yards, you could be looking at paybacks in the 10 to 15 years. You easily could be. If you're looking at low-hanging fruit, and you're looking at things such as retro-commissioning and behavioral things, and just the things that are easy, you should be able to be 6 years and less. Simple payback.
Okay. Do you recommend solar panel upgrades for schools?
Not on a, well, guys, I'm in Montana. I'm not in Arizona, so let's make that real clear. In Montana, they do not have a payback to pay themselves back. But on two projects that we've done, Great Falls and Townsend, we're adding solar panels. The school district is investing in the solar panels because they don't pay for themselves. So we We're putting them in. The school district has to invest, but they're, as far as we're concerned, they're a great learning opportunity for the students. But in Montana, they don't pay for themselves. Maybe somebody on the line from Arizona can say they do here.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've certainly, through a different avenue, through our Tribal P2 avenue, heard from some tribal communities, specifically the Jemez Pueblo in New Mexico, that has been able to, because they're just, obviously their solar gain is so enormous, they're able to sell it back to the grid. But again, it's obviously so place dependent.
Yes, I agree.
Great. So if there's any other questions as we go through on energy conservation, go ahead and send those to us, and we can address those as we go along. Thank you so much, Tim. And what is some of those dollar amounts? I remember when we spoke briefly a while back, you gave me some numbers for the Florence School District on what those, when you say a 6-year return on investment, obviously the numbers are going to vary by the size of the school, but
the Florence School District, you bet. The Florence School District was a smaller school district, 45,000, 50,000 square feet. Mm-hmm. And they were hoping to save $10,000 a year. We came in, did digital controls. We did two things for them, digital controls and retro commissioning. And the district was just in bad shape. It had not been maintained. It wasn't running well. So we retro commissioned. We put in the digital controls. They hope to save $10,000. They're saving $26,000 a year.
Great, thank you.
And then let me tell you, the Billings School District is saving just north of $400,000 a year.
Wow, big numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. And I will remind folks, I'm not sure if Tim will still be on the line at the very end of our call, but I will post the presentation online as well as some contact information. So if you've got any questions for Tim after today, then just let me know and I can get you in touch. Okay, with that, we're going to...
Oh, sorry, I was going to interrupt a little bit. There's a comment from one of our attendees about the BEF Solar for Schools program. Tim, do you know about that? It funds solar demonstration projects for schools.
I do not. I apologize.
Okay. I don't know about that either, but as we will try and find out a little bit more about that for you. Okay, so we're gonna move on from energy, and again, thank you for that great presentation on energy conservation, and we're going to talk about some other aspects of waste reduction within our schools. And some of this ties in and just sort of overlaps and builds off of what Tim said, and some of these are really entirely different beasts from energy conservation, but hopefully by going through a number of these reduction opportunities, this will give you sort of a toolkit of things that that you and your school district can take on. So you might not be in a position to do a commissioning project right now, but you might be able to start reducing your paper use. So just think of this as a toolkit that you can kind of pick and choose from, obviously depending on what's important to your school district. So I'm going to talk about paper first because it's a pretty big culprit within a school setting for obvious reasons. And the typical office generates 1.5 pounds of paper waste per employee per day. So this is far higher in a school setting for obvious reasons. And so here are just some ideas for reducing paper use within a school setting. And the first is reducing handouts to parents. Very simple tips of double-siding printing or using half sheets or sending daily email announcements or a monthly and bi-monthly newsletter are really great ways to reduce your paper use. By creating an environment where parents are used to getting information from their school on the web. So you have to kind of get them there and that's why we talk about sending daily email announcements. You have to kind of get them there, and then once they're familiar with that kind of communication venue, it's a great way of sharing information. Even decreasing your handouts to parents to every other week versus every week can make a really big difference. If you think about 300 students in a school and reducing the paper you use in your weekly newsletters by 1 page, you're saving 12,000 sheets of paper per year. So it really does add up. Another way of reducing your paper use within the school system is encouraging email or district website postings. Many school districts have instituted policies where community bulletins are posted only on the website and paper announcements are not distributed. So these are things that for a long time have come home with children on all kinds of events that are happening with regards to school or sporting events within the community, and they often come home with the children. And creating an environment where those are simply posted on the website can create a lot of paper reduction. So, but the biggest, I think, the biggest issue or the biggest waste reduction issue that we see in schools are the cafeterias. So in-school cafeterias are the #1 generators of waste. And I'm going to go through a few ways that schools that I know of have addressed waste in their cafeterias. And the first is considering a recess followed by a lunch schedule. And this sounds very simple. And schools around the country have noted a considerable waste reduction when kids have had the opportunity to exercise and don't feel as rushed getting out the door. So having recess prior to lunch. There was a recent article in the New York Times and an NPR news story that compiled some really not so surprising results that have rejuvenated this movement. And that's that when children play before lunch, there's less food waste and a higher consumption of milk, water, fruit, and vegetables. Teachers report less behavior problems and say that it actually adds 15 minutes of classroom instruction time simply because kids have had the opportunity to come in from recess and get the wiggles out, as they describe it, in the lunchroom rather than in the classroom. Nurses report fewer headaches and stomach aches, and many superintendents around the country, including ours, who's Denise Juneau, she's the superintendent of the Office of Public Instruction in Montana, is recommending that a recess followed by a lunch schedule is the best practice for schools around our state. There's certainly issues to work through if your school district is going to move to this type of lunch schedule. There's including proper placement of hand sanitizers. And if you're in a school district where many children are coming to school hungry, then this switch may not work because it's simply too long before they get an opportunity to eat. And the second is an offer versus served program. And this is a program where children choose the food that they would like to consume instead of just being handed a tray of food, like you'll see on the left, where every tray looks the same. And this is probably one of the most effective ways to immediately cut your cafeteria waste significantly. A rural school district in Oregon implemented this food choice program in their cafeteria. And previously, all hot lunch eaters were just provided a tray with the same food, so just like the tray on the left. Once they introduced this food choice program, students had the choice of a couple of different entrees. It allowed students the opportunity to accept or decline hot foods, and they had a little vegetable bar on the side where they had uncooked fruits and vegetables, bread products. And the average participation in their meal program increased from 61 to 73%, while the average cost of the food per meal dropped from 85 to 71%, from 85 to 71 cents. And the food discarded per tray dropped 47%, increasing the consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables. So obviously just one small change in their lunch program created a huge waste reduction opportunity. And the LA School District, which I'm sure is far larger than anything that, that we participate in, they saved 13,000 tons or $600,000 in waste disposal costs in 1 year by moving to a food choice program. The second thing that we see in schools a lot is that there's a lot of school districts out there that are still using styrofoam trays and plates. And so I think this is done just for was done initially just for costs, but polystyrene, which is what styrofoam is manufactured from petroleum. It's a highly flammable and it contains a chemical called benzene, which is a human carcinogen, and it's very, very difficult to be recycled. So I would say if there are schools that are school districts that are still doing this, and there are many of them, that this would be an important priority for your schools. And some school districts, when they've moved to reusable trays and reusable silverware, they can, some of them take that to a central place within the school district to have them cleaned. There doesn't always have to be cleaning facilities within the school system itself or within the school building itself. They can be taken off-site to a central place, probably where the food is prepared, and they can be cleaned there. The Chicago Public Schools threw away 250,000 trays, styrofoam trays, breakfast and lunch trays every day, so 5 million a month. And they instituted a massive effort just a couple of years ago to switch to reusable trays, and in doing so have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. So school lunches are just one part of the waste in school cafeterias. Obviously, you know, children bring lunch from home as well, and in doing so, create approximately 6 pounds of waste annually, which is about 18,000 pounds of home lunch food. With, you know, when you're looking at an average waste disposal cost of $20 a ton, it really does add up. So one recommendation that we have is to inform parents. This can be through a bulletin, it can be through a presentation at the school, it can be you know, working with the students to inform their parents on how home lunches can be zero waste. And just some ideas for how that would look is to encourage kids and parents to avoid single serving packages, to provide refillable bottles versus juice boxes and containers, sending your child with a cloth napkin, sending them with reusable containers, and using metal utensils. And also pack it in, pack it out. So that's an example of encouraging kids to take their food waste home with them. It allows families to see what their kids are eating for lunch, how much they're eating, and it also creates a mentality that can really dramatically reduce food waste. But obviously there's going to be waste in your cafeteria. That's just the nature of it. So what's the best way to handle it? So a few examples of what other school districts are using, but the important thing I think is to sort for recyclables if you have a recycling program within your school. And if compost is at all available, having an opportunity for kids to compost their lunch. Some communities have worked on an arrangement with local farms for composting if they don't have that availability within their school itself. A school in Massachusetts is even collecting used cooking oil for a biodiesel production project through their science curriculum, which is then being used for school's diesel lawnmowers. So there's a lot of ways to kind of think out of the box on that. But the important thing is that with the waste scraps is that it's very community dependent. Successful programs have to customize their programs based on what services or options are available in their community. So if you've got a local farm that's available to take compost, well, you want to capitalize on that. If you've got a science teacher that's really interested in creating biodiesel, you know, that's an avenue to explore, but it's going to be very, very site dependent or community dependent. And that's the same with the whole idea behind gardening within the schools. This can be a challenge, especially in our area, due to really long winters and short growing seasons, but it has been done with positive effects. And where we've seen this type of program work most effectively is when schools can partner with their tribal environmental staff, and if there's a tribal college or a university in your area, partnering with them as well. So as an example, the Fond du Lac tribe in Minnesota has been very successful in this effort through this exact type of partnership. They were able to work with the university and build a greenhouse and create a real curriculum around it. They created a summer camp experience for kids to where some of the counselors were coming from the university as part of their teaching curriculum that they needed to do, and they were teaching the kids about planting and gardening and all those and their traditional foods. The traditional foods was, you know, kept coming back as a really, really important aspect for this tribal community. And by working with folks that worked all year round, the tribal environmental staff, and working with folks that wanted to teach, so the tribal community college, and and then working and then combining those efforts with the school system has made it a really successful partnership. They built a greenhouse, and the culmination is a fall market and a feast of traditional foods that they do in September once all the students have come back. So they have a big market. It's a big celebration. They batter and fry their dandelion heads and all kinds of delicious sounding things, and it's been a real success. One other component of composting that I wanted to talk about, because we often overlook it, is called grass cycling, or it's just basically a compost program for your grass clippings. In Wyoming, they do this within one school district that I'm aware of is diverting 8,000 tons of grass from their waste stream, which is a lot of money if you're just dumping that into your garbage. So so that's another option. And another option that is a little bit, I guess, less labor intensive is fruit trees and creating an orchard. And I know that's been really important to a lot of Arizona communities as far as keeping their traditional foods alive. So, and that can be they can also benefit, or an orchard or fruit trees can also benefit from a smaller composting program, and can also be just as rewarding for the children. The next thing I want to talk about is water consumption, and Tim did a really good job of bringing that up. Water consumption is not the top waste producer at school, but again, as he said, it can cost the school a lot of money. So there's just some really basic questions that you can ask, and this can be a really fun project for science classes. And you can sort of conduct a water audit. You know, do your faucets drip? Are your bathroom sinks left on? Do you have waterless urinals, low-flow toilets? What's your landscaping? Are you using salt versus sand on your sidewalks? So they're pretty easy questions to get a handle on. It gives kids an opportunity to see a project from start to finish if they are able to report their findings back to the facility managers. Of course, it doesn't need to be run by the students, but it is kind of an easy project to really get a handle on. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about as far as reduction is air pollutants. And 25 million children a day ride the bus to school in the U.S. And just by turning off the school bus engine at loading and unloading zones, children are exposed to less diesel emissions. So this is a really simple way of reducing our waste. Diesel emissions are a form of air pollution that can aggravate asthma, allergies, and other respiratory problems. So we suggest instituting within your school a no idling policy that would apply to parents as well as buses. I know that my child's school can have up to 20 cars waiting in line after school, all of them with their engines running, and that's a lot of pollution that's being pumped into the air unnecessarily. There's kind of a rule of thumb called the 30-second rule, and if you are not in an active traffic lane and you are stopped for more than 30 seconds, then it is environmentally beneficial as far as the carbon emissions are concerned to turn your vehicle off. So that's a pretty short amount of time. Children walk right past those cars and buses, and this is particularly important for kids because unlike adults, children's lungs are still in development and they breathe 50% more air per pound of body weight than adults. They're closer to the ground, which means they're closer to the tailpipes, and so they're a lot more susceptible to this type of pollution. There's a couple of great sites that can provide some good information on that. One is the Northwest Clean Air Alliance, I think, and one is the EPA's Clean School Bus USA initiative, and I'll put some links on those on our website. And the next thing we're going to talk about is recycling, so our basic programs. And when we say basic, I completely understand that basic does not mean easy, particularly for our rural communities. Each district has unique challenges. Here, recycling services may be limited or non-existent. It might not be economical for private haulers to collect materials from schools in areas that are distant from recycling processors. And really, rural schools may generate insufficient materials for cost-effective recycling collection. However, with some thought and creativity, it is possible to do within your school. If your community has a city or a county recycling company, use those. And if your budget can accommodate the $30 or so a month, consider a parent or business sponsorship. That's been really successful for many school communities. And start with a team. So you've got to form your team. You've got to find out who is on board, who supports recycling. and I'm sure there's some of them out there. Consider conducting a survey, asking for who's interested, ideas, suggestions. Get permission from the school principal to form a recycling team, and make sure that that includes, the really key people: administrators, custodial staff, parents, students, and put someone on the spot by appointing a recycling coordinator or a committee chair. That's really the only thing to see a recycling program take off. The second thing you need to do is conduct a waste assessment, and I'm going to talk about that in a couple of minutes and give you some examples of what that looks like. And don't set your goals, well, you can obviously set your goals as high as you like, but start small. Set a waste reduction goal or a recycling goal that's achievable in your school year. Pick the material that has the highest percentage of your waste stream, and that usually for your schools it's going to be mixed paper or cardboard. And just by starting with 1 or 2 items to get yourself going, it allows your recycling team to kind of work out problems, and it gives you a success. If you can get this rolling, then you can show some success and move from there. But you need to figure out in all of this where your materials are going to go. You need to start with your current trash hauler, and your custodial staff, and talk about what the possibilities are. You need to do some research, some background research on whether there is a city or a county recycling program, and whether there are private recycling companies out there that can even collect your recyclables. If there are some of those out there, but they won't collect a small amount, then you should consider a district-wide collection, or partnering with a business and combining your recyclables that way. You need to work through how your recyclables are going to be stored. You need to, and that includes, considering health and safety as well. I know that cockroaches in particular are particularly fond of aluminum can recycling bins. So just working through how things are going to be stored and how often things are going to be collected, as far as everything from your paper to your aluminum cans is really important. And obviously this is all going to be dependent upon who your team is, like we said, and what you start with, what the motivation factor is, and what your commodities are that you're going to start with. But these are just things that you're going to want to think through as you start the process. Printer cartridges are one, again, the nature of school. Paper and printer ink go hand in hand. Printer cartridges are something that can be recycled. There's 25 million of them that go to the landfill each month around the country. Remanufacturing these cartridges is very, very beneficial to the environment. It takes tens of thousands of tons of plastic and metals, prevents those from entering the waste stream. So, it's hard to give you exact. There are a number of places in Montana that take printer cartridges, and usually in order to find what those places are within your own community, your state Department of Environmental Quality or whatever that's called in your state should have a listing of those on their website for recycling opportunities. And those can be something that can be collected over the year. They don't take up too much space. They can be something that you can foster throughout your school community. You can encourage parents to bring them in, and you can have a bin where you're collecting these all throughout the year from families and businesses, and then you can bringing them to your recycling company. But it is one of the big aspects of waste within our school systems. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was e-waste. E-waste is an exponentially growing problem. It didn't even exist as in the waste stream in 1989, which is really not that long ago, and now it's one of the largest components of our waste stream. And schools create a lot of e-waste. And what I mean by e-waste is just a term used to cover really almost all types of electrical and electronic equipment that has or ever could enter the waste stream. So, we're talking about TVs, computers, cell phones, white goods, fridges, washing machines, dryers, home entertainment systems, toasters, kettles. I mean, almost any household or business item that you plug in and that has a battery supply. And I think we're seeing this this rapid increase or this exponential increase in e-waste as we, as we all see these product innovations and new products coming along every day, from flat screen TVs and monitors, to new cell phones, to smartphones, and all those kinds of things, and it's really just fueling this exponential increase. And I think it was in 2000, the U.S. EPA, it was 2005, reported that the U.S. generated 2 million tons of e-waste, and only 12% of that was collected for recycling. So that just sort of begs the question of where the rest is going, and that is a really important question because rudimentary processing, illegal trade, landfills are usually where those goods are going to, and there's some big concerns with that. E-waste contains hazardous but also valuable and scarce materials. One of these toxic chemicals is cadmium. Cadmium is found in rechargeable computer batteries and in our monitors, and cadmium also bioaccumulates in the environment. It's very toxic to humans, in particular in our kidneys and bones. PVC cabling is used for our printer circuit boards, our connectors, our plastic covers and cables, but when it's burnt or when PVC cabling is landfilled, these PVCs release dioxins that affect human reproductive and immune systems. Mercury is something that Tim touched on a little bit. It's used in our lighting devices, our lights, as well as within our electronic equipment. It's used within our flat screen displays, and it causes damage to our nervous system, kidneys, brains, and can be passed on through breast milk. Electrical goods contain a range of other substances, lead, beryllium, brominated flame retardants, all kinds of chemicals. Well, really, it just sounds like a periodic table. It's reminding me of my my chemistry days, and it is sort of like a periodic table. There's up to 60 elements from the periodic table that can be found in complex electronics, just in one cell phone. And many of these valuable metals and components can be used again in other manufacturing processes if they are recycled properly. So there are ongoing and ever-improving efforts to address this problem. But here's what you can do. If there are not regular drop-off points for electronic goods in your communities, and there are in many of our communities now, even within our landfills, some of our landfills collect e-waste, and if there aren't, there are usually special collection events, and these can come from your county or your city. They are often held regularly within your community, and if there are not regularly scheduled events, and especially for our rural communities around the West, there are often what they call these milk runs, or where because one rural community or school district or whatever it is can't create enough e-waste to actually make it financially viable for companies to come and collect only your e-waste. There is often what they call a milk run, and where they'll go from community to community or school district to school district and collect the your e-waste, and package all of that together and then send it, hopefully not out of the country, hopefully to a reputable source that's going to recycle it properly. So, so look for those. Again, through your state environmental programs, should have a listing of what those are, and I know that they happen even in our most remote and rural communities, such as Browning and Cut Bank and way up on the highline of Montana. So they are happening around the country, and you just sometimes need to search them out. And because of these challenges, I wanted to just quickly bring your attention to a program called the State Electronics Challenge, and it's still a viable, or it's still a program that's existing. I'm going to go past this and talk about the fact that through its program just last year, through 2010, there was energy. They saved enough energy to power almost 6,000 households. Avoided greenhouse gas emissions equivalent to 5,000 cars a day, and avoided the generation of 412,000 pounds of hazardous waste. This is a program that is available through the West by the Northeast Recycling Council, and if you go to nerc.org, they have some great information on it, and it's basically a voluntary program that's open free of charge to state, regional, tribal communities, schools, that promotes environmental stewardships. And they provide you with technical assistance on what kind of green computers you can buy, how you can manage what your electronics are, what the responsible end-of-life management is, what you should do with it. And so it's really been very helpful for lots of different communities. And the last thing I'm going to talk about with recycling, and not too much because our time is getting short, but I wanted to touch on mercury at least a little bit because mercury is a big issue for schools. As we all know, we all have seen those huge bulbs, those fluorescent bulbs that contain a great deal of mercury. Within schools, they burn out, and then what do schools do with them? It's very hard for schools to house these bulbs until they get a big enough quantity to have sent out, and while offering tremendous advantages through energy savings, the disposal of used fluorescent lighting raises some big environmental concerns. So we just talked about what some of that mercury exposure does, but what I want to tell you now is that the recommended course of disposal depends on where you live again. So again, it's really important to work with your state environmental agency to figure out what you're supposed to do with your used bulbs. So there are some recycling options in many towns. Some towns even have a crusher or a mobile crusher, and this isn't like a glass crusher. This is a crusher like that green box up there, which safely removes the mercury out of the lamp. So it's really important that that those special types of crushers are used. And again, there is similar to our e-waste collection, our milk runs. There are milk runs that pick up bulbs from very diverse locations around the country, but you have to find out about those through your state environmental agency. So I'm going to just flip through these here. What I want to talk about here is just fun opportunities to kind of talk about, promote waste reduction, to bring awareness within your school community, and maybe to build a little revenue too. We talk about partying green, you know, schools have parties for everything. We have parties for birthdays and Valentine's Day and the 100th day of school and Christmas and Halloween and Dr. Seuss, and it's great, it's wonderful, and it all creates a huge amount of waste too. And so there's some really simple things that can be done within a classroom setting, going to reusable cups, going to pitchers instead of bottled water, using a tub of dishes, or purchasing a classroom size amount of glasses and plates that can be used within for a party. And so instead of having a parent sign up to bring plates to the party, they can sign up to wash these dishes, and it just exists in a little Tupperware bin, and it comes out for a party, and then they're washed and they're brought back, and they're often used throughout the grade or for just a couple of classes. So so those are some really effective opportunities for teaching. Localized fundraisers are examples of rather than supporting the large school fundraiser businesses that exist out there that sell everything from wrapping paper to kitchen trinkets, we encourage schools to consider a local fundraiser at their school, whether it's, and it depends on what the, you know, what the special talents of your community are, whether you want to have a community art market or a farm to school fundraiser, sell meat or egg shares. Yard sales, auctions are all different ways that schools have used to raise money, but also keep the money local rather than sending it out to a large business. And so I want to just touch on what to do now. And as Tim was saying, you really need to start with a waste assessment, and this is a general way of looking at your school's waste stream, asking some preliminary questions, doing a site tour, doing some interviews, with always through keeping these questions in mind. Why do we purchase this? What can we use less of, or what can we use more efficiently? Can we reuse it? Can we recycle these aspects or these things, or can we compost them? And I'm going to put a whole bunch of of waste assessment sheets on our website. But these are the types of things that this is an example of what it could look like. So if you're looking at the cafeteria, these are a bunch of questions you can use. How is the food served, reusable plates, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's these types of, and this is easy to do. This does not need to be done by a professional. You can just do this within your school system. And again, it's all about relationships. So as we've said throughout this, you have to build a team, designate your leaders, and get everybody on board for this to be a lasting, meaningful effort. Educate your school and build these principles into the culture of your school family. And the incentives are really, as we've said all along, with waste reduction, it's easy. You want to save your school money. And beyond that, you're doing something good for the environment. But aside from that, too, there's grant sources that are available. Here's a couple of different examples. And these are ever-changing. So it's important but just to give you a couple of ideas that they are out there. The USDA also particularly has rural development funds that can go into these types of projects. There are award programs and really just support from your school community. This is my contact information. And with that, I would take any questions, or maybe we should just launch those poll questions, I guess, first before you guys leave us. So we can ask, we'll maybe do these poll questions, and if you've got any questions, please go ahead and type those in. And we've got just a couple of minutes to answer some questions, but I'll stay on as long as we need to. So, okay, so here's the follow-up question. The annual energy bill to run America's school is more than what is spent on textbooks and computers. Okay. And the answer to that is true. I'm sure you guys all got that because you are on the ball. So what percent of the total CO2 emissions in the U.S. are commercial and industrial buildings responsible for? 10, 25, 50, 75%? Great, and the answer there, of course, is 50%, and 50% of which schools take a large component of. The largest generation of waste from a school comes from the cafeteria, classrooms, or main office. Great. And our final question, the best way to dispose of electronic waste is in the landfill. True or false? And of course, the answer to that last question was the cafeteria, and you guys all figured that out. Okay, well, and again, the answer to that is true. So thank you very much for listening. Hopefully this provided some opportunities for you to take back to your schools. As you close this webinar out, we'll ask you whether you intend to take some action based on what you've learned here. And with that, if there's any quick questions.
I have a couple quick questions.
Okay.
The cost of washing and even transporting lunch trays to a central washing location, does that really offset the constant purchasing and waste costs?
Well, it just depends on how your particular school district is set up. So a lot of school districts have a central place where they make their food and then they take them in vans. They take the food prep trays in vans and deliver those to the school system throughout the school district. And so on the run, so schools that have that type of setup, it's possible for the empty trays to be taken back and for a system to be created where you're not just doing, sort of on the deadhead run, or when the vans are going back. It's possible school districts have created systems where they've been able to tie those runs together. But for school districts where there is washing capabilities within the school, obviously it makes more sense for it to stay within the school, but it just sort of depends.
What do they do with the grass cycling? Where does it go, and who recycles and composts it?
Oh, well, in Wyoming, at the school district that I was talking with in Wyoming, they just have their own compost heap, and so they're just creating their hot compost with their grass clippings, and I can't remember what other amendments they added to it, but then they were using it on their landscaping within the grounds.
Do you recommend composting grass clippings if pesticides are commonly used on lawns?
We do never recommend using grass clippings for compost that's going to be used in a garden application, because because they're inevitably, and that holds true for communities as well, that the compost that can be for sale, that can be used for gardens has to be, or for that will eventually be a human consumption issue, can never contain grass clippings, because you just never know what folks are putting on their lawns. So that same thing would hold true for schools as well.
Okay, and I have one more. How does the business sponsorship of recycling for a school work?
Well, some school districts that we've spoken with have just said, well, we want to institute a recycling program within our school, and it's going to cost us $60 a month to get our recycling picked up. So, are there businesses that are willing to sponsor the month of April, for example, and then in the newsletter or on the district's website, that businesses gets kind of a shout out and a highlight for their willingness to sponsor the district's or that school's recycling effort for that month. That's the simplest way to do it. Although some businesses, since the amount for some businesses, that's really not a large amount of money. So sometimes a business will just adopt a school recycling program.
Do you have time for one more?
Sure. I'm here.
If I break a CFL in my school, should I be concerned about mercury exposure?
Yes, absolutely. There's certain protocols that should arrive, that should be a part of what of the materials that you get when you purchase a CFL. I just know the basics, which is to not vacuum, I think, but those protocols should be provided with the material with the specific bulb that you purchased. Okay, well, with that, thank you all for joining us. I hope you can join us again for the Environmental Justice Grant Application and Management talk, which is next Tuesday, and please consider the workshop, which is coming up in Billings, Montana on June 16th. Thank you for joining us.